Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Trump bringing the world together, perhaps not in the way that he intended. We'll
Certainly
take a look
is.
at that big summit with China and India and Russia all coming together, among others. Saagar and I are also going to do a little deep dive into that Dem influencers scandal, the dark money funding of 90-plus Democratic Party influencers. So a lot that's really interesting there, I think, to dig into about media and the future of the Democratic Party. What is even independent media? So excited to talk about all of that. I'm a little obsessed with the story, to be totally honest with you. We're also going to take a look at some big questions about Donald Trump's health. He has been very scarce, hasn't spoken to the press on camera in quite a number of days, very unusual for him. And Saagar, I don't know if you have the latest updates, but the pizza tracker was off the charts.
Yeah,
last
the pizza
night.
tracker's been off the charts for weeks, though. That's part of the issue. No, look, we're going to get into it. And just in general, I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying everyone having fun on the internet, which we should all come together.
That.
Absolutely. I told you guys on my planning call, the most fun I ever had was speculating about Hillary's health in 2016. So to the left, you're welcome back to the internet. We're all about having fun. No more taboos. Let's get down into the conspiracy land. Let's zoom in on Trump's brows. Let's make shit up. This is the fun stuff.
Yeah,
all right. So this is what we live for.
I have a lot of questions about the pictures that have been posted. Walter Reed, entrances to it were closed, like the roads were closed. The camera that's across from it was turned off. There are many details to dig into, and we will bring you all of those.
As a former White House correspondent who's actually been to Walter Reed with Trump and more, I can also give you some of my, I'm not debunking per se, but I can give you some context. We will see Trump later on.
Sounds like a buzzkill, Saagar.
Listen, I will entertain and enjoy, and I will also give some of the facts. Trump is scheduled, though, by the way, to speak sometime later today. So who knows? Who knows what he's going to say?
Who knows?
Oh, yeah.
Who knows? The plot thickens. All right. So, and then we'll turn to some very serious news with regard to Israel. 2 United States senators were actually blocked by Israel from being able to fly over Gaza. We also have now revealed the potential Gaza Riviera plan, which is one of the sickest and most dystopian documents I have literally ever laid my eyes on. Also, a group of scholars just overwhelmingly voted, the top genocide scholars in the world just overwhelmingly voted, yes, of course, in fact, this is a genocide. And then on a lighter note, we're going to take a look at a U.S. Open controversy that did grip the internet when a Polish CEO stole the hat from a young boy who had been given it by a star tennis player who had just won his match. So we'll take a look at that. We're also going to, inshallah, do the AMA Live today.
Yes. No, it's happening. It will happen in some form. We promise, and we're very sorry about all the technical difficulties. I won't bore everybody with exactly what's been happening, but we have been agonizing and working to make sure that we get it all done. So thank you all very much to our premium subscribers for sticking with us. And if you want to be able to support the show, breakingpoints.com. Actually, you know, maybe I'll even save the pitch for a little bit later on, but a lot of what we have done to design the show, the way that it's funded and more, not only keeps us inculcated from scandals like this chorus thing going on with the influencers block, but I do recommend for people to stick around for that block in particular, just to tell everyone the exact mechanics of how this stuff all works and why we are set up the way that we are, which is pretty unique compared to most, like, you know, independent shows or whatever. And there are reasons for that keep us away and, you know, insulated from some of the major pressures that are out there, business pressures, political pressures, and more.
Yeah, we set up the show, as you guys know, very intentionally to try to avoid any sort of even appearance of impropriety. And, you know, Saagar and I both jointly and separately have learned a lot about the sort of influence that can be exerted on you or attempted to be exerted on you. And so we wanted to make sure to insulate this show and guarantee that we would never be in that position. So we'll talk about the scandal with the Democrats. We'll talk about, you know, why we set up the show the way that we did. And I think there's a lot to think about as we consider what is even independent media, and how do we build an ecosystem that actually is genuinely better than the mainstream press?
I totally agree.
With all that being said, let's go ahead and get to this summit, Saagar.
Yes, some major news out of the SCO. If you're wondering what the SCO is, if you hadn't heard about it, it's the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It was set up back in 2001. It's kind of been China. It's difficult to describe. It's not really like a G7 alternative. It was originally kind of set up as a regional regional summit by the Chinese to exert power in East Asia, not just there, but specifically to try and group together non-U.S. allies. It was Warsaw Pact might be, semi-apt example, but it's not NATO. It's not any of these types of things. It's just a meeting kind of the minds. It has become kind of an alternative to the U.S. and Western-led order. Now, China this year in particular capitalizing on some of the alienation by the Trump administration of many of the global powers. And the number one story that has come out of the SCO this year is the just red carpet rolled out for Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India, as well as President of Russia, Vladimir Putin. The three of them, President Xi, President Putin, and Prime Minister Modi, put on a full display of friendship, very non-subtly signaling to the United States that their pressure of sanctions and all of that is not going to work. And the most stunning images really was the trilateral meeting between those three leaders walking together, smiling together, and sending a massive middle finger to Washington. So here is some of the footage from the SCO.
Putin and India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi held hands as they met before the summit and appeared jovial together as they spoke with Xi, surrounded by translators. At a bilateral meeting, Putin addressed Modi as his dear friend and said relations were developing dynamically.
So you could see that Prime Minister Modi was there with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Xi Jinping joined the three of them. Prime Minister Modi actually called Putin his dear friend. They announced continuing plans to buy Russian oil. Another major story that came out of the SCO this year is actually a pipeline that was announced between China and Russia, deepening the energy ties. So basically all of U.S. policy currently towards India, towards China and Russia has been trying to end the war in Ukraine. And some of the things that we've been covering now here for years has been how the U.S.-led financial system has just simply not been able to deliver what was promised. They said that they would crush the Russian war machine. It hasn't happened. They've gone after India with 50% tariffs. They said that they would buckle. Instead, the opposite. Narendra Modi flying to, I think it's Tianjin, where he met with these three leaders, and again, just holding up a giant middle finger to Washington and basically embracing China and saying, hey, look, we will cooperate with whoever we need to cooperate with. Part of the reason this matters is that since 2011, there has been an assessment here in Washington about the so-called pivot to Asia, which I believe with all my heart, which is that Western Europe and the Middle East have diminishing returns for our relationship with those two places, that we're too obsessed with them, which we spent too much of our money obsessing over these foreign conflicts. Israel and Ukraine are the perfect poster children for that. 50% of global GDP will be in East Asia in just a few years. You're already watching now the limited value of dollar sanctions. The BRICS phenomenon has been one that's been talked about for quite some time, but this is kind of the closest that BRICS in particular has come to becoming a real thing, and we're going to be covering it now. But in the China, in the China sense in particular, it is just stunning to see how they have especially used the Trump years and the Trump administration to put themselves as the official, number two superpower in the world. And in my opinion, operating very smartly. So let's put this up here on the screen. This was Xi Jinping outlines China's ambition to reshape the world order in Showpeace Summit, a quote unquote shock and awe Victory Day military parade. There's a real military parade, by the way. They actually do know how to march over there in China. This week.
Some old busted, rusted out tanks and guys who don't know how to march. None of that.
Not sponsored by Palantir or to Coinbase
Crypto,
or any of those guys. They don't do that over there. It seeks to, quote, recast the Second World War narrative. He's called on Russia, India, and other countries in the region to join China in leveraging their economic influence specifically to challenge the West at a time of rising geopolitical and trade ambitions. Hosting the Regional Security Forum on Monday with more than 20 leaders, he said that the world is undergoing turbulence and change, that they need to uphold a, quote, orderly multipolar world. So you could not make it more clear what their goal was. And put A3, please, on the screen. I thought the Washington Post did a pretty decent job of kind of summing it up here. They just say China tries to use Trump turmoil to unite leaders against the U.S.-led order. And it's interesting because all three of these leaders, the flagship leaders that gathered at the SCO, have their own reasons for challenging the US-led status quo. Putin has Ukraine. China just has its, they want to declare complete independence from the West and seek to build a second financial system, a second global order that they run, which obviously is to their benefit. It's the same thing the United States did with the so-called US world order. India has always kind of played its cards close to its chest. They've been very suspicious of the United States since the 1970s. The US alliance with Pakistan is something that continues to grind their gears. Here in Washington, there has been an agreement under the so-called pivot to Asia. It's like, well, if we want to quote unquote isolate China or keep US friends in the region, then we need to make sure that Japan, South Korea, and India, the three most powerful nations in East Asia, are rock solid with the US. But the Trump tariffs have done more to offset the pivot to Asia than any single piece of foreign policy that I could think of in just the last 20 years. Yes, the Israel obsession, the Ukraine obsession indirectly takes away, but the levying and the targeting of India and then the failure of the sanctions on Russia are just two glaring opportunities for China. And you're really watching a reverse Nixon happen, where Nixon famously opens China, wants to separate China from Russia and the Soviet Union, to split the two powers, to establish and break apart, global communism. And instead, what we have seen happen is as if we had forced the two together through basically, an entirely a fault of our own. So it is the most important story in the world. There's no question. We've been tracking it here for a long time.
And then you add Brazil to that mix.
Yes.
And you have, of course, we've been following the way that, a series of tariffs have been levied on Brazil because Trump isn't happy about what their court system is doing with regard to Bolsonaro trying to, do his own coup in Brazil in a very Trumpian fashion. And so you truly have a situation where he has united these nations in an alliance that, was previously would have been very difficult because they are very different nations. They have very different interests. They have their own, concerns, squabbles, et cetera. And yet in the face of this insane tariff regime, they truly have sort of come together in this way. It's also very interesting, the narrative, the rhetoric coming from China, recasting the end of World War II and their own role, really highlighting their own role in defeating fascism and building that post-war international order. And effectively what they're saying is, listen, the US, they're a bunch of hypocrites. They've dropped the ball on this. We're going to actually build out the inclusive multipolar world based on international law and be the true inheritors of the legacy of the post-war international order and build out this new multipolarity in a way that respects the interest of all these countries around the world. So, for a lot of nations that are being hit with tariffs and, subjected to this very capricious foreign policy from the Trump administration, this is obviously extremely appealing. And it also is a recognition of the reality of where we are as a globe, as the world right now. The funny, we were sharing with India, one of the reasons that Trump got upset with India and started throwing all these tariffs on them and throwing a fit about India is because Modi wouldn't accept his narrative about brokering the ceasefire between India and Pakistan. He was like, that really didn't have anything to do with you. And then Trump wanted him to nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize. And he was like, not doing that either.
I'm good, actually.
Yeah. And that is what sparks Trump's rage at India. So, you can't deal with someone like that. You can't work with someone who is so unserious, so capricious, and so, frankly, insane in the way that he operates.
Something I just have come to deeply respect about many of these nations is the level of seriousness which they take their geopolitics. So in China, I've talked to her endlessly about industrial policy. They have orders of engineers in every bureau managing the state, its capitalism, making sure that the factories are being built properly, put in the right places, spreading economic development, building roads, high speed, and all that. The alternative to that is I recently saw a video of a guy who was the equivalent of Google searching the word dictator, and they call it, you need to come for tea in Chinese, to the Chinese police department. They literally go through your search results and be like, why'd you search for this? Why'd you search for this? Why'd you search for this? That's just part of the social contract. In India, for example, Jay Shankar, who's their foreign foreign minister and many of these other, these are serious students of U.S. global foreign policy who sit around and are like, okay, what are all the big mistakes that we have made here? How can India further itself? We have all these problems, all of this poverty and corruption, and we also have our own political issues. How do we square this circle, set India up for the future, have technological development, make sure that the country is insulated from the West? You know, their seriousness around tariffs, and look, I'm not saying I support their tariff system, but because it's bad, it is bad for us empirically. But one of the reasons why they have such massive capital controls on the country is they're like, we will not be messed with by other countries, period, even if it means sacrificing interim economic growth. I recently just read a book by a guy named Dan Wang about China. It's such an incredible book. I highly recommend everybody go out and get it. One of the things that she determined some 10 years ago is he's like, financial markets and stock market shareholderism is good for the super elite. It's bad for companies. It's bad for development. So that's just not something that we're going to do as a nation. Boom. I mean, and they have the ability to be able to do that. I'm not saying I favor their system, but I favor the seriousness and the level of thought that they put into how they're going to try and challenge the West. And that shows also in again, what I think is very sophisticated foreign policy on their part. Let's put A4, please, up on the screen. And you can just see here, I mean, this is the biggest troll that you could ever have. Right after the Putin-Trump summit, Modi posts this photo of him in the Russian presidential vehicle, and he says, after the proceedings of the SDO, President Putin and I traveled together to the venue of our bilateral meeting. Conversations with him are always insightful. Apparently, they spent nearly an hour, you know, in the car together, just talking, I guess, really about the challenges of Trump, about how they're going to navigate the relationship between their two countries. And meanwhile, you know, we just have the absolute base level of idiocy here in our nation for our discourse. Peter Navarro, who is the trade counselor for Donald Trump, has, I mean, he's the attack dog, right? And by the way, I actually respected Peter in the first term. I read his book. I don't think he's wrong necessarily about tariffs, but the worst problem with Peter is that he turned himself into like this January 6th hero. You know, he's Trump's most loyal warrior. So when Trump decides to declare war on India because he's butthurt that they won't nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize, he goes all in. He adopts the rhetoric. He's like a household name now in India if you watch the news over there. I've been checking in just to see how they tolerate this. And this is the level of discourse that we're currently hearing for Peter Navarro and from the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on India. Let's take a listen.
Modi's a great leader. I don't understand why he's getting to bed with Putin and Xi Jinping when he's the biggest democracy in the world. So I would just simply say to the Indian people, please understand what's going on here. You got Brahmins profiteering at the expense of the Indian people. We need that to stop.
So this is going to be a deep cut for those of you who are not familiar with the Indian caste system. But what Peter Navarro basically is saying there, it's that these high caste Indians, the Brahmins in India, are profiteering. Now, if you knew anything about said caste system, you would know that the Brahmins are actually not the business class and not the major oligarchs who are in India. Just saying, this is empirical fact check. But it just shows the extent to which they're basically just grasping for whatever like low IQ, you know, caste / like criticism that you can have of India and then broadcasting it to the world. Their new line is that India is a democracy, so they need to align with democratic values. I have news for you, Peter. India is a democracy. And they know who you are. And they know who Trump is. They know who America is. They've been pissed at America ever since Biden singled them out about Russian oil. You guys are making it 10 times worse. I can guarantee you. By the way, Modi, you know, it's not like he won a stunning re-election. He's probably more popular than ever right now doing these types of moves. The Indian intelligentsia, the Indian from like the people who can not even read who vote all the way up to the intelligentsia are literally united against the United States right now in a way that I have never seen from a country which, you know, I mean, how many millions of people in India originally wanted to come here? There's still a lot of Indian immigrants, you know, who apply H-1B visa. We talked about that. That's more of a domestic political issue. But I see a lot of that changing over in the next period, which, you know, I know some of the white nationalists and other people will be happy about that. But at a very base level, like America, the global empire, is basically crumbling all around us. For what? For Ukraine? Or for Trump's ego? For Israel? I mean, you know, all of these things are actually all interconnected. Israel is actually probably the most important part of the story, which sounds crazy to say, but the reason why is that for years, the United States goes abroad and wags its finger. It's like, oh, you can't be doing this. You're authoritarian and you're bad. You're feeling bad things around the world. And the Chinese and the Russians and the Indian were like, oh yeah, how's Iraq doing? Is it a thriving democracy? But now, you have Iraq, you have Libya, you have Syria, you have Israel, you have Ukraine, right? All of those things together. And they're like, we're not listening to you anymore. We don't care what you have to say. And you put that together, and that's how you get the SCO meeting of 2025, which I do think will be a landmark moment in geopolitics.
And Ukraine is complex, right?
Yeah.
So it's less clear cut. Russia did invade, so there is a liberal international value that is being upheld there. Truly, Israel is not complex.
Yeah.
Like, we are supporting a genocide. We are supporting colonization. We are supporting outright occupation. We're going to talk later about this just like PowerPoint ethnic cleansing plan that's being floated, where, by the way, the U.S. is going to be the protectorate. So I'm sure you guys are all going to be really excited about that. It is so glaringly obvious. In fact, truly, I know they put on a sort of like joint statement about Israel in the context of this summit.
If you want to.
They should do more. I mean, the opening is it's truly wide open. The vast majority of the world's population is in horror and shock at what is being done in Gaza right now and disgusted with Israel. I mean, Israel truly is a pariah nation everywhere except in like this particular area where we sit right now in DC among elites right here. And so, there really is a wide open lane to show global leadership and to show, no, we really are the true arbiters. We really are the true representatives of this international world order.
Yeah, and look, I think it's important in that context just to show you how a lot of the rhetoric is just crumbling. Let's put A8 up on the screen, please. And you can see very clearly, like, what they say from the SCO is that member states strongly condemn the military strikes by Israel and the United States of America against Iran in June of 2025. Quote, such aggressive actions against civilian targets, including nuclear energy, which result in the death of civilians, are a gross violation of the principles and the norms of international law and the UN Charter, and infringement on the sovereignty of the Islamic Republic of Iran. They undermine regional and international security and have serious implications for global peace and stability. Now, no one should delude themselves into thinking that China and Russia in particular care all that much about civilian casualties. But that's where the rhetoric and all that stuff matters, because the United States basically accused Russia of committing a, quote, genocide over Bucha, all right? I mean, if you look today in the U.S. intelligentsia, they're like, Putin is a child murderer, right, for the strikes. And that's true. It's true, right? Yes, strikes have killed children, civilians all across of Ukraine. But how can you sit there and say that you need to use the full weight of the empire when you're also backing up what's going on in Israel? You can't. The thing doesn't square. So then it's actually not about any of that. What it's really about is power. And that's what those countries understand more than anything. The Chinese for long have held on this thing called mutual respect, where they're like, look, well, you guys do what you want to do, and we're going to do what we want to do. But we don't want to be hearing about any Uyghurs. We don't want you guys to be talking about Taiwan or any of this other stuff, because that's our business, and we don't tell you how to run Alaska or Hawaii or any of that type of stuff. Well, I think that hits even harder again in the year 2025, in the context of everything that is all happening. And again, just to highlight all this BRIC stuff, let's put this video here of between Lula and between Modi. I mean, this is not really something that you would see. It's not that long ago.
Yeah.
You could see the two leaders grasping hands, hugging, coming together, basically trying to broadcast to the world that this alternative system is one which they are fully embracing. These are both two leaders who have been hit with some 50% tariffs, both capriciously under the Trump administration, with no, strategy or any of that behind it. And meanwhile, Trump is just spouting off. Here's his latest, we can put it up there on the screen. Quote, what few people understand is that we do very little business with India. That's not true, by the way. It's the 10th largest trading partner with the US, but they do a tremendous amount of business with us. In other words, they sell us massive amounts of goods, their biggest client, but we sell them very little. Until now, a totally one-sided relationship. It has been that way for decades. The reason is that India has charged us until now such high tariffs, the most of any country, that our businesses are unable to sell into India. It has been totally one-sided disaster. India buys most of its oil and military products products from Russia, very little from the US. They've now offered to cut their tariffs to nothing, but it's getting too late. They should have done so years ago, just some simple facts for people to ponder. But what Trump doesn't really get is that this is a vindication of the Indian strategy. Their high tariffs, high capital controls, and more on the country are exactly what insulate them from tariff threats from because they know, they planned for this for years. They saw what happened with their nuclear program. By the way, they banned Bitcoin a long time ago. Anything that challenges the primacy of the state, of the rupee, and of the ability for India to remain sovereign, they nuke it. And they see it very early. TikTok over there, not even a question. They're like, it's done. They banned it years ago. Because, again, for them, they care about sovereignty. It would be nice to live in a country that actually cared about things like that. Same with the Chinese. And so they know, and they've studied this Russian sanctions now for years. And they see, they're like, oh, doesn't matter so much. Got oil, got guns, we got a lot of production capacity. Some of the world's, I think the world's largest population in India. We'll be all right. And that's basically the path that they are choosing. They can do enough business to sustain themselves. I'm not going to say it's going to hurt. It certainly will. But broadly, they're making enough of a bet that especially, everyone again talks about democracy. Over there, it would not be popular to capitulate to Donald Trump. I can guarantee you that if people in China or Russia could vote too, like for a real vote, all of them would probably back up, standing up against the U.S. So that's part of the democratic principle that a lot of people in the West are not ready for. Democracy doesn't ultimately mean we're all good friends here. It means will of the people. And I'm pretty sure that what's happening there over there is actually the will of the people, 100%.
Well, I mean, it's ironic too, because Trump and Modi in a lot of ways were natural allies because they actually share like similar nationalist ideologies. And in the first administration, there was much more, you could see much more of that overlap and, that sort of simpatico view of the world. Can we put A6 back up on the screen there? Saagar, just take a look at this image and tell me, do you think that this is the cure for the toxic masculinity of the manosphere? Do you think this is it right here?
What do you mean?
This very tender, loving, affectionate between these two powerful alpha males.
Sure, yeah.
I think this is a model for the world.
Yeah, I guess I could go with that. I can see it. I mean, Modi is an interesting character. I wouldn't call him like an alpha male. He is a lot of respect for things like yoga and fast. I mean, it's like Indian male in their context. It doesn't really translate to the West. But I don't know. I don't really know enough about Lula to be able to say the same. But I do know, watching all of this, it's one of the most broadcasted screw yous against the United States. Genuinely, I mean, I can't think of another time that the leaders of the most powerful states outside of the Western Hemisphere would gather together and in an explicit go fuck yourself, to the United States.
Well, I keep thinking about what Professor Jeffrey Sachs told us, which is that our decision to levy these sanctions on these tariffs on India as a result of their decision to continue buying Russian oil, he called it one of the most foolish foreign policy mistakes that the U.S. has made in years. And that's saying a lot, because we've made a lot of really horrific mistakes in recent years and decades. And this is why. I mean, this playing out in front of you is exactly why. He has united these countries, and it really is on him. Now, there are other things that lead to this point. I'm not saying it's the only factor, but his tariff policy has to already be deemed, like in terms of American interests, one of the most disastrous economic policies ever pursued, certainly in modern American history. It has made our economy here, we can already see the effects in certain goods, prices going up. You can see, the rate of growth in the economy slowing. You can see more and more consumer debt being taken on, like all sorts of red flags flashing here in our economy because of his economic policy. So we aren't benefiting, quite the contrary. And meanwhile, he has clarified for the rest of the world, okay, it's time that we get together and we move on from this mess because this is a disaster and we can't count on these people. This guy's a psycho. This country is hypocritical. They're insane. We've got to figure out how to do our own thing over here and make sure that we are protecting our own nations. And it really does lay at the feet of Trump.
Absolutely. It is, it's about Trump's ego. It's about a misreading, I think, entirely of the way that geopolitics and all of this works. It also is completely counter to many of the things that were talked about by Donald Trump and all of the people who work for them. It's not an exaggeration to say that this is the exact opposite. This is the Lindsey Graham course. You know, oh, we got to lever tariffs on 500% tariff on India because of the war in Ukraine. While we continue to back up, you know, it's like, it's as if the Israel and Ukraine conflict are the sun, the moon, and the stars, and everything just revolves around them, and that this entire, you know, part of the world is just these secondary or tertiary characters. With, in reality, Japan, #3 trading partner in the world. You think that the Japanese people are happy about that trade deal and all the bullshit that they went through? They're not, okay? You can go and read their press. Same with the South Koreans. I mean, the South Koreans similarly are in this weird limbo state where they're like, you know, they used to be understood as a massively important U.S. ally. They're basically just on the back burner. They pay them no attention. When they do pay them attention, it's to hit them with some tariffs or to get mad at them over Samsung or any of the other companies that they make. We're playing like Little League baseball. And that is what, you know, again, I have nothing but admiration. Maybe that's bad and it speaks to me, but like those are countries run by actual statesmen. And yes, Putin, all of them, they do terrible things. I'm not, you know, absolving them of all of the bad. I wouldn't want to live in Russia. I wouldn't want to live in India, and I definitely wouldn't want to live in China. But I have nothing but admiration for the seriousness which they run their countries, and we don't have any of that. We do not have any of that.
No.
And that's the starkest and the most depressing part, because you and I know for the next 3.5 years, probably the next 8 years, let's be honest, it's just, we're locked in. And the Chinese century, it just seems more likely than ever before.
Yeah, we're run by a bunch of clownish, evil buffoons who make some of the worst decisions of all time.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.